Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, what a big week it's been. Bitcoin's up $1,000. It's a sea of green across every coin. We saw the total market cap jump $30 billion in 24 hours. I'm going to talk about all the crypto news, what caused that price action, and all the big macro news for you, like always. Just a reminder, we are in Sydney this week for EdCon, hoping to see you all at our meetup in particular on Friday night with the Crypto Lark. Keep an eye on our socials for all those details as well. But on this day in crypto history, so this time last year, George Soros finally came around and said he's getting into crypto. One of my favorite TV shows, Silicon Valley, really started taking on an Ethereum-like theme and brought it to the mainstream. Crypto marketplace Open Bazaar opened up. In 2015, the Royal Reserve Bank of Australia said that Bitcoin regulation is not worth it, and I think that's something that central banks are going to have to change their mind on fairly shortly. Square adding Bitcoin payments in 2014, and Forbes saying that Bitcoin would never be able to succeed because it has a fixed supply, and that's a design flaw. So into the local news here in Australia, and we saw auto loan delinquencies surpass their highs at the GFC. So we know housing has turned down. That continues to trend lower in just about every capital city. And then we look at the second order effects about what other people are going to cut back on. Now, consumer staples has been one of the worst performing sectors in Australia so far. So households are cutting back. They can no longer afford those expensive cars that have been purchasing, and just something we want to keep an eye on, as well as the budget forecast that came out this week. And isn't this a classic example? It reminds me a lot of the central bankers. Every year here they say, look, it's going to get better next year, it's going to get better next year, it's going to rise sharply next year, and every year they're wrong. Every year wage growth has trended lower and things have not got better. So no surprises in the budget. They're forecasting that, guess what, things are going to get better next year. So we know what to believe. A sad one here, Julian Assange might be being forced out of the Ecuadorian embassy. So yeah, an Australian guy, he certainly divides the community with his opinions, but he has won a number of prizes for the work that he's done. And, you know, telling the truth, I'm not sure whether or not that counts as a crime. It depends who you ask. But yeah, I'd hate to see anything happen to him. I think we need to stand up for these sort of guys, the Edward Snowdens and Julian Assanges of the world. So something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on. Another scary headline to read this week, that some virus malware infecting computers and faking cancer diagnosis with CT scans. So I think the whole notion of computer systems and centralized databases being able to be compromised, this is one of the problems that blockchains do solve, increasing security. And again, we're going to see these sort of attacks in all these sorts of different industries. We see it in government databases all the time, and leaks of all our data. So another reason why people are going to look to turn to a more secure option. 5G is another headline that's been dividing the community lately. So it's starting to be rolled out, and Brussels has halted that rollout, and it seems that Europe always take a bit more of a cautious approach, whether it's Roundup that we were talking about last week or 5G. I think that this is the safer option, to do more testing. Now, conspiracy theorists will tell you that 5G causes cancer. Other people tell you it's been tested and it's safe. So again, this is something that is being rolled out. What do you think? Do we need to do more research before we just roll out all this sort of thing and add to the, energy pollution, some people are calling it, roams through the air? Let me know what you think of 5G below. Global smartphone share. So a lot of people think that Apple's the biggest brand in the world, but Samsung do have a pretty large piece of the pie. We then see these different brands in different countries, but global smartphones, the cheaper and cheaper options are starting to roll out. So we've seen that Apple tend to have the highest price point, but they're losing that market share, and their earnings have been going down, share price have been going down, and this is something that I just wanted to show you guys, that I think there's a range of cheaper smartphones that are going to be coming out to people, along with that 5G and better internet access. And it's really frustrating to see in Australia that we still have some of the worst internet going around, and some of these developing nations with basic smartphones are going to have better access to internet than us. Over to Russia now, and this headline seems to be coming every week, that Russia are dumping more and more of their dollars and their treasury bills and buying gold at the fastest pace in decades. So here you can see the yuan share of their reserves compared to those US dollars, so cozying up to China. We know China and Russia like to work together and trying to get rid of their anti-US dollar assets, and getting rid of their SWIFT system as well. So Russian banks join the Chinese in an alternate global payment system. This trend is only continuing, trying to turn people away from the US dollar. ECB rule that Deutsche Bank must raise more money for Commerzbank. So if you follow the GFC and all these financial crisis documentaries, you know the banks love to speculate, they love to use leverage, they don't have the capital to back it up, and if things go wrong, they like to get bailed out, by the government, by other central banks and so on. You lose as a depositor to your bank. They are speculating with your money, and this is one of the arguments to break up the banks and have banks with mortgages and whatnot should not be allowed to be speculating with that money, depositors' money and so on. And I want to touch on a great documentary I watched in just a second. So the global trade is taking its sharpest downturn since 2009, and we see slowdown all across the board, developing nations, the US, we know what's happening in Australia, and obviously all across Europe. Now, there's a number of reasons that this is happening, all these different trade tensions, and there's a number of headlines that Trump seems to be the focus of. So Trump declaring war on OPEC, and OPEC, I think, is something that is not going to last forever. So for those that don't know, OPEC is the band of nations that get together to, try and control the supply of oil to some degree, so it has a stable price. Now, everyone is trying to protect their own interests now, and particularly when prices go lower, we saw a lot of tension, and the US has, revved up their shale industry. So OPEC and Saudi Arabia no longer really have the control that they used to have anymore, and no surprises here. Saudi laughs at the oil price surge, and Donald Trump thinking that he has control over this as well. So stocks rally into the close later this week on report that Trump plans to announce a Z summit. So all these talks at the moment about trade and optimism, and they're going to get a deal, they're not going to get a deal. Look, this report comes out saying that stocks are rallying because of this trade deal, and then only 24 hours or so later, we hear that this trade deal might take to 2025 to commit. So the media love to pick out certain headlines and tell you that that's why markets went up and down. Markets have become so short-term and news-focused that we often don't look at that broader macro picture, which a lot of people are saying is slowing down. And this is evidenced by things like US jobless claims dropping to their lowest level since 1969. Again, this is an example of people saying, hey, everything is so good, jobless claims at their lowest level. But if we take it a step further, job layoffs have surged 35% to the highest level to start a year in a decade. Now, this week, Martin North and I are going to be diving into how that unemployment rate is calculated, and again, why a lot of these measures aren't the best way to get a feel for the economy, and how it's all going. So global yields have been compressing. We know that yield curve has inverted and the US dollar slides as Trump calls for QE4. So if everything turns down, we've spoken about this before, there's going to be more money printing, lowering interest rates, and what we're waiting to see is how everyone reacts to that after being told that everything was better. And that really leads to this documentary that I wanted to talk about, the Princes of the Yen, Central Bank Truth documentary. So this is one I finally got around to watching. It's absolutely fantastic. It talks about the issues that Japan faced and how they basically tried everything, and they were a prime example of changing the way the banks print money, drop interest rates, and none of it really worked. And I guess this documentary most demonstrates the way that the US in particular and other financial institutions put countries, businesses, whatever it is, into this state of debt, jack up interest rates, and they swoop in. They want to buy up all their assets on the cheap. And that's what I think we're seeing unfolding at the moment if developing nations continue to get in trouble. All these US guys that get to print money out of thin air are going to buy up the rest of the world's assets. And I think this is where we're starting to see a lot of friction as well. But let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. Into the crypto news. And this week we finally saw SEC staff get out a framework about digital assets and how to determine if they're contracts for investment and whatnot. Now, a lot of people have said that this made it even more murkier and hard to digest, particularly with some of the examples they gave. And this no action letter over the turnkey Jet ICO tokens, saying that these aren't securities. So we're waiting for better and better frameworks and guidelines from all governments, just as we are particularly here in Australia, about what is a utility token, what is a security, but governments continue to struggle as this space is always evolving. In terms of all these different assets, this was one of the best interviews I've ever done, and it's funny how these ones I think are really important never tend to get the views they deserve. So Daniel from DX Exchange, we talk about the future of all digital assets and markets and how that's changing. They've got an app to let you invest in all these ETFs through synthetics, all on the Ethereum blockchain. I think this is the future of finance, breaking down the barriers to entry. I've signed up, and check it out, guys, if you haven't already. But I think this is really, really exciting. I'm going to interview Apr as well this week. Over to, this is InstaDAP, and this is a user interface for DAI, for borrowing and creating loans and so on. So this is the future of finance. It's already changing. And here you see the top 100 loans. So $12 million is the biggest loan at the moment. We've got 8 million, 7 million there. But here you see the collateralization ratio, and the liquidation price for a lot of these is around, $80, $100 each. So what this tells me is that a lot of the big guys, liquidation price there, a lot of the big guys are pretty confident that the bottom is in. And something we spoke about was whether or not the bottom could be in for altcoins, even if Bitcoin is still at risk of having one more leg down. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the price action. Funfair, one of my favorite projects, one that I've been buying, and Funfair roadmap came out this week. They've rolled out their first project, their first licensed project. Check that one out. Keep an eye on their roadmap. I think these guys are still set for big things in 2019. In terms of gaming, this is one that I checked out, godsunchained.com, and I think this gaming space is so fascinating. People spend so much money on in-game items, all these digital collectibles, non-fungible tokens. I was really impressed with the graphics and this, and it's already becoming really popular. And card games are a good example of something that doesn't require millions of transactions per second. This game is built on top of the Ethereum blockchain. I think it's really cool, and we're starting to see this gaming space really explode. And I maybe want to do a gaming week soon and talk about all the best gaming projects. Ripple lovers this week are happy that they've got an exchange-traded product going live on the Swiss exchange. So this is one of the exchanges we spoke about that are getting into the STO space. This is the next best thing to an ETF, I guess you can think of it as, but something that tracks the XRP price, gives those institutional investors way to get exposure to Ripple. PayPal diving into the blockchain space, but this is not what it first seems. A lot of people think, wow, PayPal are now using cryptocurrency for payments. Not quite the case. They're getting into it from more of the digital identity side. So you can think Civic is another one. In Australia, we've got Brontech with their Bron ID. So a lot of people are recognizing that having an identity in the digital world is a great use case for blockchain. Tezos has had a great run this week, and Coinbase came out and said that they're going to start the institutional staking. They want to break into that space. So a lot of these proof of stake coins are coming out now, and custody is coming out. So now we have a way for these larger institutions to stake those for you and earn your rewards. Now, obviously, we promote holding your own keys rather than letting Coinbase or any establishment hold them. But again, it appears that this is a pretty attractive option. Tezos having a strong rally, and I think I said in our premium group that I wouldn't be surprised to see Binance follow suit. And it was literally 24 hours later that Binance announced that, yeah, our partnership with Trust Wallet is going to allow us to also launch staking services for Tezos, and then other coins to follow suit. Now, with Trust Wallet, you can hold your own keys, but we definitely need more user-friendly ways for people to be able to stake and earn rewards for those larger cap coins that I like to keep an eye on. Jamaican Stock Exchange to pilot Bitcoin and Ether trading. Now, this is one that I'm interested in because I've followed the Jamaican Stock Exchange for a few years, and they had a lot of trials and talks going on with Veritasium. Now, if you're still a Veritasium holder, I sold that one out a year or so ago after it had a tremendous run, and I didn't feel they'd made any progress. And this was their last hope, the Jamaican Stock Exchange. So I haven't followed Veritasium since I sold, but to see the Jamaican Stock Exchange pivoting and not using Veritasium as much as they had hoped. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. Malta financial regulator approves 14 crypto assets. So Malta became that home that everyone wanted to go to because they had the best crypto-friendly regulation. And then all of a sudden Malta said, hold on, everyone's come here. We've got a lot of responsibility. Let's just take things slowly. But they've finally come out and given out 14 licenses to trade crypto assets and so on. So Virtual Finance Asset Act, and this has been adopted by the Maltese government last year. So we're going to start to see that STO space start to blossom in Malta as well. China's a funny one, and we've spoken about this a lot, how, some people say that crypto is banned in China, you can't trade at the exchanges and so on. We know the ecosystem's actually still pretty vibrant, and they're just trying to get their house in order in terms of regulation. And then we get reports like this that they're leading the world in blockchain projects. So there's still a lot of money being thrown around at ICOs, particularly at early stage startups where you can get equity in the company. That's how the STO space is going to continue to grow. There's a lot of money being pumped into the blockchain space, even though ICOs themselves have certainly seen declines in the amount of money being raised. Now, this week, Mike Novogratz came out and said that Litecoin is a glorified testnet, and that is one of the arguments we hear a lot. I actually think that Litecoin is going to have a lot of value going forward, and literally this week we got more news about Bolts. So Bolts is you can think of this as another aspect to the Lightning Network. So you can pay Lightning Network invoices by using Litecoin or Bitcoin on the main chain, and that is really, really exciting. So rather than having to open a channel, you can think of Bolts as maybe the middleman that's doing that for you. And these are the sort of test nets where Litecoin is always going to play a major role, and I think it is still the silver to Bitcoin's gold. This is a tweet from Julian, the former 10x founder, but what he's highlighting here is that there's been a lot of large transactions, in the millions of dollars range here, go from exchanges back to wallets. And that tends to be people that, are storing their crypto. So you tend to send it to an exchange when you want to sell. Take it off an exchange when you want to put it into your own hardware wallet and store it yourself as a holder or a longer term play. So this is another good thing. A lot of people like to keep an eye on these stats about what's flowing through the network. Blockchain allows us to do that, and there's no doubt that the top 100 wallets have increased their holdings, and we've seen a lot of people this week take profits off the exchanges and put it into cold storage. It's funny how, a couple of days and a couple of weeks of green, everyone has come out. We've got dozens of new members in our premium area. We see new subscribers to all the YouTube channels and views go up. And Bitcoin is the #1 trending on China's biggest search engine. But we also saw, Google trends triple or quadruple this week as people start to get interested. And a lot of people are still waiting. They'll wait for higher prices to buy. We know how that sentiment and market cycles work, but I certainly think we're getting to a really exciting time. Now, it was back in January I made this video for you guys. Litecoin was trading at $30, and I said Litecoin is likely to bottom and feel the effects of the halvening, months to even up to a year before Bitcoin. And sure enough, this has played out perfectly. Look, we've already gone in that short span of time up to $100 Litecoin. So if you watch this video, bought some Litecoin, you've already at least tripled your money. Litecoin traded as low as $20, which is pretty crazy. We have a look at these resistance levels here. Last week, Litecoin trading around $60. I thought it was going to take a bit of a pause at the $80 mark. It had a bit of a pullback there, but like a lot of these coins, just slicing like butter through and getting up to that round number, that $100 target where Litecoin has spent a lot of time in the past. And geez, look what happened last time Litecoin burst through $100. We went to $400 pretty quickly on Coinbase, which was absolutely insane. Did you guys take profits on your Litecoin when it ran to 400? But look, Litecoin and the volume coming in, this is all such positive signs, guys. Coming back to test the 200-day moving average, this plays into that theory I've been talking about that I think particularly Ethereum that leads altcoins, that a lot of these other coins may have bottomed. Now, look, again, with ETH here, let's just bring up our cycles. Cycles pushing up. Come back and test the 200-day moving average there. Are we setting up for another leg higher? I think we well and truly could be. We've got this cycle pushing up until April 22nd here on Ethereum. We're right at this key level now, $170. Once we clear that, there's not a lot of resistance. You'd think we'd get up and test $200. So much positivity. And before we get into Bitcoin, I want to show you this that BitLord brought to my attention. This is the insurance fund on BitMEX. And the last time this really rose exponentially was on the 12th, 13th of November is when this started. And then it's happened again the other day before the jump. So let's head over to Bitcoin and go back to the 12th of November. And here we see that was the day or two before we saw that huge move to the downside. So the BitMEX insurance fund jumps. Do they know something's coming? I need to look into this more, but that happened again the other day, right before this jump. You guys know we've been at a key technical level on Bitcoin here. We've had this blue line drawn on the chart for weeks and weeks. Whether you want to call this the Adam and Eve double bottom that we've been looking at, inverse head and shoulders, ascending triangle. Guys, this is the point I want to make. There's so many different types of traders that interpret the market differently. A lot of people are watching this key level. People watching the moving averages, all these different sorts of traders, Elliott wave traders. A market is made up of so many different participants, and it doesn't really matter what they're each looking at, if it's right or wrong, if you believe in technicals or fundamentals or sentiment. The fact is that everyone is going to act on what they believe is right, what they believe moves the market. And we happen to have a lot of synergy in what people were looking at. And that's why Bitcoin jumped $1,000, in a couple of hours. And now it's holding it. So when you hear headlines that $30 billion has entered the market in an hour or two, that money just doesn't come out of thin air. What happened is the total value of crypto on paper has gone up that much because people are paying higher prices. So $30 billion doesn't have to come into existence and enter the crypto market. This is the new value that the total market is said to be worth when we just times the circulating supply of all the coins by the current price of all the coins. So that is something that's really important to understand. I think Bitcoin's market cap is set to go much, much higher. I think there's lots of money that still wants to enter this space. We've held these moving averages. As long as we do that, guys, I'm still remaining pretty bullish. We've got the pullback on the cycles here due on April 9th. So whether or not we have a day or two to cool down, or we have that another leg higher in the coming 24, 48 hours, and then a bit of a cool off. But geez, what an exciting period. We've been really extended on, especially on these shorter time frames, the 4-hourly and the hourly. So we definitely need to cool off at some stage, guys. But look, just about on all these time frames, we're holding these moving averages. All the dips are being bought. We're just waiting for those averages to catch up before we have that next leg higher. And I want to leave you on this thought. So when Bitcoin went up $1,000 in an hour, a $70 billion market cap can still jump 20% is absolutely insane. Think about how good that felt. Everyone was so excited on the different crypto groups and crypto Twitter and whatnot. And it's that feeling, that dopamine, that excitement, the feeling that we're, defeating the banks and starting our new system and whatnot. That's very, very strong. And no other asset class really offers that same rush. As I said in this tweet, I think more and more people are going to become victim to this, how addictive it is to be trying to fight for a new system. We're hoping to make money at the same time, but I think everyone gets pretty frustrated with the financial system and the banks, and they're joining this mission one by one, and hopefully you guys are continue to encourage people to join this space. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this week's wrap up. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.